Hello, welcome to Converging Dialogues. This is Xavier Bonilla. On this episode, I am very happy to bring my conversation with Daryl Davis. Daryl is a musician, actor, author, and lecturer. As a musician, he's an international recording artist. He's known for playing all types of music, specifically blues, rock and roll, boogie woogie. He's played with many legendary folks such as Chuck Berry. He's had many roles in acting as well, namely on the television series The Wire. His second job, or his other job that he does a lot of work with race relations. He's written a book called Clandestine Relationships, and even has his own documentary out, Accidental Courtesy. He's been on many outlets, CNN, NBC, Washington Post, and we talk about both of his jobs in the conversation. Many people talk with Daryl and they talk about how he talks with, KKK members and former KKK members, neo-Nazis. But I also wanted to get some of his impact on music as well. I feel like many people don't talk to him enough about that. And so this conversation is sort of kind of split in half. For the first part of the conversation, we talk a lot about his work as a musician, and we talk about music and what that's like in music today. So we start the conversation by talking about his background in music, how he came to be a professional musician, how his career has gone in that way. We talk about writing and performing music, some of his ideas about that. We talk about the music industry, both past and present. And then we kind of shift gears, and he gives a little bit of a biographical picture and talks about how his exposure living abroad in the Foreign Service family was instrumental to his outlook on humanity. And then I'd say the second half of the conversation, we talk about his work with KKK and neo-Nazi and hate members of hate groups. He talks about his first encounter with a member of the KKK, which is just a gripping account that he, just listening to him, I was, kind of transfixed. It was such a compelling way in which he tells the story. We talk about how race functions differently around the world, how he conducted his first interview with a high-ranking KKK member. He talks about subsequent meetings with KKK members and how he continues to do that work. And, we end the conversation with talking about many ideas about race, but how one can be involved in combating extreme hate, and what are some tangible, practical, balanced ways of doing that in the different roles that can be needed from different people. I mean, there's not enough wonderful things to say about Daryl. He is an inspiration. He is absolutely fantastic, and one of the nicest people I think I've ever talked to. Really, really genuinely. I really enjoyed talking with him, and could have talked with him for more and more hours. He's really doing some pretty astounding work, and my hope is that folks listen to this conversation and support him and what he's doing, and that they can think about their own ways of how to have difficult conversations with folks that might be different than us. And so now I bring you Daryl Davis. I'm here with Daryl Davis. Daryl, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Xavier.
Very excited to talk with you. As I was saying before we hit record, we have a good mutual friend in Angel Eduardo. So he's a great guy. And so yeah. So some people may be familiar with you, but for folks that aren't, why don't you tell listeners who you are and what you do and all the particulars?
Well, professionally, I am a musician. I got my degree in jazz back in 1980 from Howard University. But I make a living playing jazz, rock and roll, country, boogie woogie, blues, a multitude of genres. And have been doing that ever since I graduated in 1980. So now, professionally 42 years. Wow. But I'm probably more widely known as someone who sits down and talks with people who allegedly hate me, white supremacists in particular. And I've had many interactions with neo-Nazis, alt-right, the KKK, and many others. Quite a number of them have been very successful in that these people, after talking with me, not immediately, but over time, begin rethinking their ideology, and then they began renouncing it and leaving those movements.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful, that part of your story, which I definitely want to get to. Before we get there, let's talk about your I guess your first job, your first day job, which is music, first love, I guess. I guess, how did you get into music? And how did you get into it? Which specific genres? I mean, was it just kind of, the kind of quintessential, you were playing on pots and pans when you were 5 years old? I've heard some versions of those stories. Or did you kind of come to it late? How did you just kind of get involved and then want to do it?
I came to it rather late, Xavier. As a kid, I was fascinated. My hero was James Bond. And I wanted to be a spy. To this day, I still have my 007 briefcase. You push the handle and it fires plastic bullets and stuff. It's probably worth a lot of money today, right? But
yes, it is.
But anyway, that was what I wanted to do. But at the same time, I also wanted to be a computer programmer, because back, I'm 64. So back when I was a kid, computers took up more than this whole room you see behind me. And I knew there was money to be had. I never dreamed that computers, would get as small as your cell phone. But, so both vocations were pulling at me with equal force in opposite directions. So I couldn't move either way. And for years, I kept trying to figure out, how can I do both? How can I, be a computer programmer and a spy? Back then, there was no way. Today, of course, there is cyber espionage, right? But long before that, I had thought about people that I admired, and I always liked music, but I just didn't play. Two people that instantly came to mind were Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry. And what I admired about these two gentlemen was the fact that they had made millions upon millions of people all over the world happy with their music. People that they would never meet, never see, but they had touched them through their music. Everybody has heard Elvis Presley's songs or Chuck Berry's songs. I thought, that's really cool to be able to affect people that way and never even meet them. I want to do that. I want to make people happy. So I'm going to become a musician. I decided that like almost overnight, once I thought about people that I admired. And even though I couldn't play, I began to learn how to play by ear, listening to things. Now, because I admired them, I began listening to them, of course. And I began listening to who they listened to. The blues came before rock and roll, boogie woogie, country music, all that kind of thing, all the roots that led to rock and roll. So I began studying that on my own. I had friends in school who were in high school jazz band, concert band, marching band, little rock and roll bands outside of school. They would show me little things and I would practice them at home. But then by my junior year of high school, I'm going to be going to college the following year after I graduate. I decided, hey, you have to audition to major in music. So I have to learn how to read. I went out and bought books and taught myself how to read music because you have to audition. So I passed the auditions, but I had bad habits. I was playing with the wrong fingers, it's like teaching yourself how to type. So, I was accepted, but I had to relearn and break those bad habits. So I got my degree in music 4 years later, and I've been a professional musician ever since I graduated in 1980. Starting in 1981, I got to begin working with my idol, who went on to become a very good friend of mine, my mentor, my hero, the late great Chuck Berry. I played with him for 32 years. Wow. Not every gig, but many gigs. And I learned so much from that guy. Wow. That I still apply today.
What do you play specifically? Do you play a bunch of different
piano?
Instruments?
I play piano, and I sing, and I play some guitar.
Oh, very nice. Very, very nice. Today, it is very hard still to make a career, to have as your job as a professional musician. I know many, many friends that do music and they try to do it full time. And they're super talented, but it's very difficult to make a living, pay your bills, a mortgage, all that stuff.
It is extremely difficult. Okay. But I'll tell you the key to my success, I've been very fortunate to have been, to have met a lot of the right people, through networking and things like that. Discipline, staying away from vices, drugs, alcohol, all that nonsense. Staying away from that. But I also went to the Chuck Berry School of Music. What I mean by that is just by working with him, I learned so much about the business. And that was one of the main keys to my success as a musician. Sure, there are a lot of obstacles out there, and many people more talented than I will ever dream of being are out there starving as musicians. Yeah. But you have to follow certain rules of business. The problem with musicians is that they have a lot of talent, but they don't devote enough time to studying the business. And that becomes their downfall. People exploit them, take their money. There are people right now on the charts with platinum records and don't have a penny in the bank. Have all the talent in the world, but somebody else has the money.
Or someone will own their rights to their music. Exactly. This happens a lot. This happens a whole lot. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. And that's what I learned from Chuck Berry and how to get around that and how to navigate that world.
So how do you, I guess, usually approach, I mean, this is kind of two different modalities, but how do you usually approach writing music, and if you write music, and how do you approach, performance? These are obviously two kind of ways of doing music, but how do you, what's usually your kind of method, I guess, of doing that?
Well, sometimes for whatever reason, I'll hear a melody in my head, and then I'll expand upon it. And then I decide, okay, do I want to make this sound bluesy? Do I want to make it sound jazzy or country? Do I want to keep it as an instrumental, or do I want to put words to it? Other times I might hear a line. I might hear somebody say a line on the street, we're just talking, and something somebody says, or I might be watching a movie and just, a phrase. It could be 3 or 4 or 5 words. I thought, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I expand upon that line and I create a song. Now I got the lyrics. What do I do with them? Do I leave it as a poem, or do I put some background to it, some musical background to it? So that's how I approach that. Performing has never been difficult for me. I believe in connecting with my audience. I've seen so many of my idols do that. And so I follow, in their footsteps in that regard. Make people feel like, they are a part of the performance, regardless of whether you're in a small, intimate nightclub or you're at a festival with tens of thousands of people. You want to relate to that audience. And, when I was attending concerts and watching people, those are the things that I would observe. And those are the things, that I try to emulate.
For where we're at now with music, I mean, there's a lot of different ways and different genres and stuff. But I think if you listen to, I mean, I guess there's not really a top 40 anymore. But whatever playlist people are downloading, whatever people are sharing, or things that make Billboard Top 100, whatever. I mean, what do you feel? I guess just about generally, if you think about popular music or pop music or things that might get nominated, things like that, just music in general that's very popular. What do you feel, I guess, the state of music is at now in terms of kind of popular music that people are listening to, stuff that would historically have been on the radio or things like that? Where do you think we're at just in terms of music trends and things like that? What do you feel about it?
Well, music has always been in flux, but today, though, in the last, 15, 20 years or so, it's been more in flux because people have more control over their music than we did, 30, 40 years ago. You wanted to get music out there, you had to be on a label, whether it was a major label or a minor label. They would distribute it. They put you out there, all that kind of thing. Now people can make their own. They can have their own label, right in the comfort of their own basement. Right. They can record their music. It may not be as good as recording at one of the major record companies, but they can do a pretty decent job. And you can put it out yourself. You can distribute it, via any number of platforms on the internet, things like that. Get the word out. And some people have been, rather successful in doing that. So while we have more control over what we put out and how we put it out and the money, it may not be as lucrative, say, than if one of the major labels puts it out and puts all that money behind you. It'll be more lucrative for them than will for you. But it'll still be more lucrative for you than doing it on your own. However, you got to decide, do you want full control and maybe a little less distribution, or do you want less control and more name recognition out there and perhaps, some more money? So that's always changing. And then, what's the format? Before, I used to have to leave my house and go to the record store and buy a 45 or an album, right? And come back and put it on the turntable. Then it was, cassettes, and then 8-tracks, and, now CDs. Well, I'm sorry, excuse me. Then CDs, now downloads, right? So, a lot of young people don't have the need that older people have to feel something, hold something in their hand. It's like books. A lot of young people rather read it on the Kindle, whereby at my age, I want to have that physical thing and turn the page. So, that's what I'm saying. It's changing. Where is it going? I don't know. We don't have to buy an album anymore. We can just go on any number of platforms and see the album and pick out the tracks that we want and download them.
Yeah,
make our own playlist.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely what young people are doing nowadays, which is always strange for me. I'm not that old, but I'm from that generation where you would buy, an 8-track, a cassette tape, CD. I still buy records. It's a kind of I've always collected for a long time, even when I was much younger as an adolescent, and I still do that. I have a lot of records. I still buy them. I still like there's a type of experience, right? Like you put a record on, and it's I usually put a record on. I'm reading a book or something, a physical book, and then that side of the record stopped. You get up, you turn it over. It's a whole experience to it. You take it out. There's a lot of art that goes into it. I also like supporting certain groups to get the physical copies, things like that. I don't know. There's something there that you're having an experience of sorts. I listen to music obviously on the iTunes or other platforms as well, but I don't know. There's something about that's just not really replaceable. Maybe that makes me old. You're
100% right. You're 100% right. And one of the things that is lost on a lot of younger people, and I'm not faulting them. Technology is a wonderful thing. Yeah. But we can also lose a lot with technology. Okay. So just from your talking just now, you also are of the generation when you used to go hear a band and you heard strings on a brass section. You look up at the band, you're seeing people blowing their horn or doing this, blowing a violin. Today, you don't see that. You hear it, but you don't see it. You see them doing this. They're playing those strings and horns on the keyboard. Okay, so the difference. When you put on the radio and you hear a song that has a string background, whether that's real or whether that's synthesized, because your ear has been accustomed to the real strings and the overtones and whatever else, right? Young people have never heard that. So their ear is accustomed to synthesized instruments. So it doesn't matter to them. It matters to me when I hear a saxophone. I'm like, that's somebody trying to imitate a saxophone. That's not a saxophone, So it matters, and that's what's lost. There's like a disconnect because they can't tell the difference. Some of them grow up with drum machines. We know the sound of a real drummer. And if you've never heard it and you don't know the difference, where's that going? 20 years from now, it'll probably be robots playing music. Right. Is there going to be a human element to it, or is it all going to be sterile? Very mechanical?
Yeah. There's something about the organic elements of music, and I think that's. I mean, I was one of those people that even when I got a keyboard, because we didn't have space when I was younger to have a full piano, I needed to have a keyboard that had weighted keys at the
Right.
least. At the
Right.
least, I couldn't
I'm with
play. You know, I have played obviously keys. You know, and there's some cool things you can do with those synths and stuff like that. But if I was going to play something, I needed the 76 or the 81 or whatever it was, and I needed weighted keys to as best as we could emulate the
feel of a piano.
The feel of a piano. And you know, so I don't know. There's certain things, and I think that there are some bands obviously that still do that. You know, maybe they're not on Billboard Top 100 or whatever, but and I think there are some young people that really do like, that's cool to kind of hear some of the old stuff. So that is always nice. But I think that I think sometimes my my daughter will play me stuff that she listens to, and I like some of it, and I'll say, I said, when I listen to this though, this sounds very sanitized. It's very produced. And she'll say, oh, and she can kind of get an ear for it now and be like, yeah, I can kind of see what you mean. And so, I think there's sometimes I think young people can also have a respect for, the old stuff, which is, stuff that, maybe I listened to when I was younger, but I think it's cool how, hopefully we don't lose too much of that.
Yeah. Definitely.
So music, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was part of how you got into kind of the second big aspect of your life, which is talking to these various individuals. So maybe just tell us the kind of the origins and the story of how you start talking with some extreme groups and extreme individuals.
Okay, well, we have to go back a little further, even before the music. I was a child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. So I grew up as an American embassy brat, living all over the world, starting at the age of 3. And throughout my formative years, you would get assigned to a country for 2 years. You'd come back home here to the States. You'd be around for a few months, maybe a year, then off to another country for 2 years. Now, this started in the 1960s. Like I said, at the age of 3, I was in 1961. So my first exposure to school was overseas. I did kindergarten, 1st grade, 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, overseas. Now, my classrooms over there, my classmates were from all over the world. Nigeria, Japan, France, Czechoslovakia, Russia, Germany, you name it. If those countries had embassies where we were, all of their kids went to the same school. So that being my first exposure to school, like I said, kindergarten, 1st grade, that became my baseline, my norm for what school was supposed to be, right? But every time I'd come back home here to my own country, I would be in all Black schools or Black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And back then, we didn't have the amount of diversity in this country in the classrooms that I had overseas, right? You remember Black and white TV, right? Okay, and then you remember when color TV came out? It's like, whoa, something, just magnanimous, right? Well, for me, while my country was living in black and white, I was living in Technicolor, overseas. So coming back was like going from color TV to black and white. It was the reverse, all right? And I had some racist experiences, people throwing rocks and bottles at me at the age of 10 when I was the only Black scout in a scout parade. Things like that I did not understand because I'd been around people who looked just like the people throwing those things at me. And they didn't behave like that. My little French friends, my little Swedish and Danish friends, they didn't throw things at me. And they looked just like my American friends in terms of skin color. My fellow Americans from the embassy, some of my friends at school here, they didn't do that. So it had nothing to do with the color of my skin. I didn't understand why they were doing it. My 10-year-old brain could not process that somebody who had never seen me, never spoken to me, knew nothing about me, would want to hurt me for no other reason than the color of my skin. I didn't understand that. And so finally, I accepted that this thing called racism, I had never even heard the word racism until I was 10 years old. I'm dead serious because that word was not in my sphere. I was around people from all over the world. We didn't look alike. We didn't speak the same language. We didn't worship the same, but we got along. We played together, went to school together, had our slumber parties, whatever, you know? So I could not imagine somebody else not judging somebody, you know, by the color of their skin. So when I finally accepted that at the age of 10, you know, the hard way, up against the head with a bottle or something, I formed a question in my mind, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And now I'm 64 years old. I was 10 years old then. So for the next 54 years, I've been looking for the answer to that question. Well, I have a vast library that I started as an adolescent and on through today, through adulthood, on Black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, anti-Semitism, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, trying to learn about that ideology. I would ask people, why do people think like that? Oh, well, Daryl, you know, that's just how some people are. That's just the way it is. Well, that's not an answer to me. I need to know why. So after I graduated college, I began playing all kinds of genres. Country music had made a comeback. And there had been a movie out called Urban Cowboy, out of country music, right? And so all of a sudden, all the bars that were doing top 40 switched over to country. And so, you know, I wanted to be a full-time musician, which I was. And I joined a country band. I was the only Black guy in the band, generally the only Black guy wherever we played. And we played a place in Frederick, Maryland called the Silver Dollar Lounge, which is, you know, that plaza is now a Costco now. But the hotel where the lounge was is still there. The lounge is gone. And the Silver Dollar Lounge was known as an all-white lounge. Not that Black people could not go in there. You know, there were no signs saying no Blacks allowed or whites only, but it had that reputation. And Black people simply did not go in there because, you know, you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it's not always a good idea. So here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge with this band, the all-white band except for me. Now, they had played there before. They were pretty well established in that area. And after the first set of music, I came off the bandstand on break, and a white gentleman came up to me, put his arm around my shoulder, and told me how much he enjoyed my piano playing, and said, you know, this was the first time he'd ever heard a Black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. And I was not offended, but I was surprised that this guy was probably a decade and a half older than me, and that he did not know the Black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's style. And I proceeded to tell him, you know, that Jerry Lee got it from the same place I did, from Black blues and boogie woogie piano players. That's where rock and roll, rockabilly, that style of piano evolved. And he didn't believe me. Even after I told him, Jerry Lee is a good friend of mine. He's told me himself. He didn't believe that either. But he was so taken with me, he wanted me to come back to his table and buy me a drink. Well, I don't drink, but I had a glass of cranberry juice. He paid the waitress. He took his glass and he clinked my glass and cheered me. And then he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a Black man. He just blurted that out. I mean, like this was some big thing, epiphany he's having. And, you know, again, because of my upbringing and my surroundings, you know, during my formative years, being around everybody, I cannot imagine somebody as old as he was having never sat down and had a drink with a Black man or a meal or a beverage. So innocently, I asked him why. And he didn't answer me at first. He stared down at the tabletop. And I asked him again. And his friend sitting next to him elbowed him and said, tell him, tell him, tell him. I said, tell me. He looked at me and just as plain as day, he said, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And I just burst out laughing at him. You know, I was genuinely laughing because I did not believe him. You know, I know a lot about the Klan. I just told you I got this vast library. And I know they don't come up and hug a Black guy, want to buy him a drink and praise their talent and want to hang out.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
So, you know, this guy is jerking me around for whatever reason. It's funny. And so I'm laughing until he went inside his wallet and handed me his Klan membership card. And I recognized the Klan insignia, which is a red circle with a white cross and red blood drop. This thing was for real. So I stopped laughing. It wasn't funny anymore. And I gave him back his card. But we talked about the Klan and other things. He gave me his phone number. He wanted me to call him anytime I was to come back to this bar, the Silver Dollar Lounge. let him know so he can bring his friends, meaning his Klanswomen and Klansmen friends. And so, I'd call him and they'd show up with him, next time we play there and watch me play. And on the breaks, I would make my way to the table to say hello. Some of them would stay there and want to meet me and talk to me. A couple of them would get up and move across the room and not return to the table until I left. So the message was, we don't want to touch you. We don't want to shake your hand. We don't want to talk to you. We just want to look at you, whatever. So, that went on till the end of that particular year. And I quit that band. And I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else was going on. And then a few years later, it dawned on me, Daryl, the answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap and you didn't even realize it. Who better to ask that question of than somebody who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them, who don't believe as they believe. Get back in contact with that Klansman. Get him to fix you up with the Klan leader from Maryland. Write a book. No books had been written by a Black author from interviewing the Ku Klux Klan face to face. So I decided that's going to be my new project. So that's what I did. And that's how that started.
So the first question I have is well, how did it feel like when, as you get he tells you he's part of the KKK, you look at the card and then you're like putting everything together and all these things, I'm assuming that you were, if not the only Black person, one of few Black people in the whole establishment. I mean, you must have had a whole assortment of feelings at that moment.
No, that did not happen at that moment. It would happen later. But let me explain why. And let's go back to the music thing for a second. Just like we talked about, if kids never heard real drummers on their downloads and real strings and a real brass section, and all they know is the synthesized sound and they're okay with it, they only know what they know, right? They don't know something that their parents and grandparents grew up with.
Yeah. Okay,
so now let's go back to where we are with this Klan thing. Don't forget, I had an experience that most American kids, most Black American kids, even most white American kids don't have. I grew up in a multicultural environment. At the time when my peers were suffering racism and discrimination in our own country, I was not suffering it when I was overseas. I would only suffer it every time I would come back. So I already had a different perspective on the world. I didn't look at somebody for the color of their skin. I looked at them for how they treated me. And even when somebody who had a different color than I did treated me poorly, I didn't think it was because of my color. It's like when the people threw rocks and bottles at me in the Cub Scout parade. I thought they didn't like the Scouts. I didn't realize I was the only Scout getting hit until my den mother and Cub master all came and protected me with their bodies. I'm like, why are they doing this? Racism was not in my world. Now, had I grown up here my whole life, I would have been exposed a lot more to it. So I might have been totally freaked out when this guy says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I might have jumped up and maybe punched him or left or whatever. But that was not my growing up experience. Now, that does not mean that I condone the Klan by any means. No, it's just that I had a different experience because I was exposed to so many different cultures around the world. When I was presented with the culture of white supremacy, it was like, oh, it's just another culture. That's how I viewed it.
It's so fascinating because there's a lot of lessons to learn from that. But before we get to that though, so you call back the guy
let me just add one more thing. Okay. Yeah. So I lived in Africa for 10 years. I lived in Europe as well. Now I can tell you something. Black people from Africa who come over here to study or whatever, they are discriminated against by the same racists that would discriminate against me.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a racist doesn't care what
Mm-hmm.
country you're from.
Mm-hmm.
They care about what color you are,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Right.
Okay, so when I suffer discrimination today, it hits me a little differently than it hits somebody who just came over here from Nigeria or Ethiopia, because they didn't have that in their country.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like kind of like wondering, why is this person judging me on this? I can do the job as well as he can. I got, straight A's in my class. Why am I not being hired? They have a whole different perspective. In fact, I was talking about 2 weeks ago to a very good friend of mine. He's a former neo-Nazi leader, and he's out of it now, and he and I are the best of friends. He had run into somebody from the Cameroons, and the guy from the Cameroons said he never realized he was Black till he got here. So it's a whole different, world where in some countries you're not judged by the color of your skin. You may be judged by something else. Hopefully, the contents of your character, as Martin Luther King would put it. Like, for example, in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, you got Catholics and Protestants. They look alike. They both are white, but they're killing each other because of the religion, right? We cannot fathom that in this country. Catholics and Protestants here in the U.S., we get along fine, okay? Over there, they don't. In Lebanon, it's the Muslims and Christians. In Israel, it's the Palestinians and the Jews. So, there's certain things where people look alike, but they have different ideologies or different religions. Over here, it's more or less a color.
Yeah.
So that's why my reaction was not, what most people would expect, and they don't understand that with me. They think, oh, well, you must, like the Klan or something, if you don't react that way.
Yeah, you have a very international or global perspective, which I think is very instructive on why potentially this wasn't registering like it would for other people that have born and raised and lived here continuously. How did you you reach out to the person that you met, and how did it all work out that you were able to meet the leader of the whole chapter or whatever it is of the organization? And just tell us kind of how did the story continue? Did you do this regularly? How many people have you met? What's usually the process? How many conversations you have? Just kind of give us a kind of a overview of how it usually works out.
Well, I'm still doing it. And this started, almost 40 years ago. Well, a state leader in the Klan, what you and I would call a state leader is the word governor. In Klan terminology, that person, the governor, is known as the Grand Dragon. That means state leader. A national leader, what you and I would call the president, is known as the Imperial Wizard. Now, this guy was named Roger Kelly, was the Grand Dragon at the time for the state of Maryland in the Klan. And I wanted to talk to him. I decided he's going to be my first interview. And then I'm going to go around the country, interview other Grand Dragons, Imperial Wizards, members, etc., other officers as well, and write a book, because no book had been written by a Black author. And so I contacted that Klansman from the Silver Dollar Lounge. I had to persuade him to put me in contact with Roger Kelly. I wanted him to introduce me to him. He refused. By the time I found this guy years later, the guy from the Silver Dollar Lounge, I left the band, and lost contact with him. He was out of the Klan at that time, and he did not want to introduce me to Mr. Kelly. He was fearful. He was genuinely fearful for my safety as well as his own. And I persuaded him to give me Mr. Kelly's phone number and his address. And I said I would go to Mr. Kelly's house and talk to him. And he's like, Daryl, do not go to Roger Kelly's house. He will kill you. And this guy was serious. He was genuinely concerned for my safety. And so he begged and pleaded with me not to give Mr. Kelly the knowledge of where I got his personal information. I said, okay. So I had my secretary, who was white. And the only reason I mentioned that, not because I care about somebody's skin color, is because I had a reason. I had Mr. Kelly's number. I could have called him myself. But given the fact that Mr. Kelly, I was told, hated Black people, he would kill me, I figure if I call the guy and ask him if he'd sit down and talk to me, he'd probably hear in my voice that I'm Black and hang up the phone. Say, I'm not talking to you, click. And my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. So if my secretary, Mary, who was white, called him, I know that he would detect in her voice, this is a white woman. And I know enough about the mentality through all the books that I've read. They're very chauvinistic, that he would not automatically assume that this white woman on the end of the line is working for a Black man, especially a Black man who's writing a book on the Ku Klux Klan, because they didn't exist at that time.
Sure.
So that might increase the odds that he would grant me the interview. And then obviously when he shows up, he'll see that I'm Black, and he can, decide if he wants to talk to me, if he wants to walk away, if he wants to attack me or whatever. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So I explained that to her. I said, do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm Black. If he asks, don't lie to him, but don't give him reason to ask. And another reason why I did not want him to know in advance was this. If he knew in advance that I was Black and he was still willing to talk to me, to interview with me, I did not want him to have time in the interim to prepare different answers than he would give to a white interviewer. I wanted spontaneity.
Yeah.
Okay, so she understood. She called him. He agreed to the interview. He did not ask what color I was. And we set it up. We set it up for a room in the motel right above the Silver Dollar Lounge. And Mary and I got there super early. And I gave her some money, sent her down the hall to the vending machine to get some soda pop and put it in the ice bucket, fill it with ice, get it cold. I wanted to be hospitable when my guest arrived. I had no idea what this man was going to do when he saw me, but I knew what I was going to do. I was going to offer him a cold beverage like I would offer you or anybody else who comes to visit me. So she did all that, and we waited. I had I took the lamp table, took the lamp off, put a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly and a chair on the other side for me. And hotel room lamp tables are very tiny anyway. And I had a bag beside my chair, a black canvas bag that had a copy of the Bible, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization. And they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. So now I've read the Bible. I've never seen that. I want to be able to pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please show me chapter and verse where it says Blacks and whites must be separate. I also had a cassette recorder and blank cassettes in the bag. I set the cassette recorder in the middle of the table, all hoping that if Mr. Kelly did come in my room, he didn't freak out and leave. If he did come in my room, that he would allow me to record the interview. So I'm all prepared. Right on time, there's a knock on the door. Now, you cannot see who's in the room from the hallway. That's just by design of the room. You have to come in the room, walk around the corner, and then you see. So I'm sitting in the most hidden place, well, not hidden, but inconspicuous from the door. And so you have to come around the corner before you see me. So I wanted to make sure Mr. Kelly came halfway into my room before he saw me. So Mary hops up and goes around, opens the door, and in walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk. Nighthawk, well, Grand means state. Nighthawk means bodyguard, security. So a Grand Nighthawk would be the bodyguard for a Grand Dragon, like an Imperial Nighthawk would guard the Imperial Wizard. Anyway, in walks this guy. He's wearing camouflage, like military. And he has that Ku Klux Klan insignia, that red circle, white cross thing on his chest on this side. He has the initials, letters KKK in big letters on this side. And embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And on his hip, he had a semi-automatic handgun in a holster. So he comes in and he turns the corner and he sees me and he froze in his tracks. Well, Mr. Kelly had not rounded the corner yet, and he had no idea that his Nighthawk had stopped short. So Mr. Kelly came around the corner and bam, hit that guy right in the back. And and they're stumbling around trying to regain their balance. I'm looking all around the room, like, I'm sitting at the table just looking at their faces, and I could read their faces like a highway billboard sign. It was just very clear. They were thinking, did we misunderstand the room number from the desk clerk, or just an ambush? So I saw the apprehension. I stood up. I displayed my palms so they could see I had nothing in my hand, no weapons, anything like that. And I walked forward right up to Mr. Kelly. I extended my right hand and I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis." And he shook my hand. And the Nighthawk shook my hand. So far, so good. I said, "Please, come on in, have a seat." Mr. Kelly sat down and the Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. And before I could sit down, Mr. Kelly says, "Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification?" I said, "Sure." So I handed him I went in my wallet, got him my driver's license. And he's looking at it. He goes, "Oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring." Now that had me a little concerned. Why is he, looking at my street? All he needs to do is look at my name and look at my picture and look at me and match it up and give me back my license. He doesn't need to know my exact address, right? So I did not want to let him know that, oh no, this, he's checking me out here. Is he going to come by my house and burn a cross? What's up? So I wanted to let him know that under no circumstances was he to come uninvited for any nefarious purpose, right? So I said, "Yes, Mr. Kelly, that is where I live. And you live at," and I named his house number and his street, right? And that way I was leveling the playing field. I know where you live, you know where I live. Let's confine all this visiting to this motel room. So he smiled, he nodded his head like he understood. Now, I did not realize it that day, but I was the one being presumptuous. I had no reason to fear Mr. Kelly coming to my house and doing anything nefarious. The reason why he mentioned my street, which I did not know at the time, one of his Klan members lived right down the road here.
Oh, man.
It's like 2 neighborhoods over, but my street runs through both these neighborhoods. And I had no idea. So he recognized the street name because he has to go on my street to get to his member's house.
Wow.
I found that out many, many months later. And today, that same Klan member who used to live down here, he sits in a federal prison in the state of Maine for committing a hate crime. So, but there was no way I could have known that at the time.
Yeah.
So we carried on with this interview, and Mr. Kelly and I were talking, and the Nighthawk was standing at attention. And every time Mr. Kelly would make some biblical reference, or my cassette recorder would run out of a cassette tape, I'd reach down and pull out the Bible, reach down, pull out a blank cassette to change it. Every time I reached down, the Nighthawk would reach up to his hip and put his hand on the butt of his gun. Now, that's okay, because that's his job. Right. His job is to protect his boss. He doesn't know me. I'm the enemy. He doesn't know what's in my bag. So he's doing his job. That was my attitude. So I was okay with that. And after a while, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, he realized, there was no threat in the bag. He relaxed. I went in and out of the bag. The guy didn't move. And just a little over an hour into this interview, Mr. Kelly and I are talking, and out of nowhere, just out of nowhere, there was a very fast, short noise, like a shh. That was it. That was it. And we all jumped because there was no reason for some strange noise. And it was so fast and so short that my ear could not discern what it was. But I knew that Mr. Kelly had made that noise. How did I know that? Because I didn't make it. So if I didn't make it, somebody made it, had to be him, right? My secretary is not making noises like that. I've known her for a number of years. I never heard that kind of noise. And so given the situation, I'm a Black guy. He's the head of the Klan. I was told not to fool with him because he'd kill me. There's his bodyguard right there with a gun. And now this guy is making some strange noise. I feared for my life because I could not explain that noise. And so I therefore perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. And I jumped up out of my chair and I hit the table because I had gone into survival mode. And, when you fear for your life, that's where you go. And there are only about 4 things you can do in survival mode. Some people, the fear is so great, their brain cannot process it. And the brain shuts down and the person just faints. They're scared, they pass out.
Yeah.
I don't faint. I don't do that. Another thing people will do, their muscles will tighten up and start constricting. They'll ball up and start shaking. and they can't move. You can be punching them, hitting them, kicking them.
Mm-hmm.
They won't even be trying to block you. Like this.
Mm-hmm.
You see people get into a fight and ball up into a fetal position.
Right.
That's called paralysis by fear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're so paralyzed. They're so scared they're paralyzed. I don't do that either. Another thing people will do is to run away. That is the best option. As quickly as you can, separate yourself from the source of fear. Get away from it. And if you don't know what it is, right? That is the option that I would have chosen had it been available. But there's no outrunning a bullet in a motel room.
Mm-hmm.
I was not armed. Mary was not armed. The only person who I knew for sure who was armed was the Nighthawk. I could see his gun on his side. I did not know Mr. Kelly was wearing a suit and tie. I did not know if he had a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. All I knew was I'm not armed and I cannot outrun a bullet. So the fourth option is to do a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. And when I flew out of my chair, I was on my way to dive across that table and grab the Nighthawk, grab Mr. Kelly, and slam them down to the ground and take away the Nighthawk's gun, because I had to immobilize the situation. My job is to protect me and protect my secretary. The Nighthawk's job is to protect himself and his boss. All right. So when I hit the table, I'm just inches from Mr. Kelly's face. I'm looking right into his eyes. I didn't say a word. My eyes were doing the talking for me. My eyes were saying to him, "What did you just do?" And Mr. Kelly's eyes were looking right into mine. And he didn't say a word either, but I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?" And the Nighthawk is back with his hand on his gun, and he's looking back and forth at both of us, like, "What did either one of you all just do?" Well, Mary, she was sitting to my left on top of the dresser because there were no more chairs. And she realized what had happened, and she began explaining it when it happened again. The ice in the ice bucket next to her had begun melting, and the cans of soda were falling down the ice.
Oh my God!
You know, and so I mean, it's funny but not funny. You know, somebody almost got shot over a damn ice cube.
Yeah, but that's the whole ironic part. It's like, oh my gosh, the most insignificant thing could have really ended somebody's life. So, oh my goodness.
Exactly. So, you know, but there were several lessons taught in that moment. Let me give you a couple of them. One is this: neither one of us knew what had transpired with that noise. But yet we both felt fear. That is a human emotion that indicated we both are human beings. When that fear was addressed and relieved, we both felt relief, because we all began laughing after Mary explained it and then it happened. You know, we all began laughing. Can you imagine a Black man and a Klan leader in the same room laughing at the same thing? How crazy is that? We're on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, yet we are enjoying the same relief and same laughter. Okay, that's human. So we can relate to each other on a human level in that moment. All right. Now, the next biggest lesson is this: all because some foreign, most important word here, foreign entity of which we were ignorant, underline the word foreign, highlight it, circle it, whatever. All because of some foreign entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice cans of soda. Okay. Now we knew it was there, but we'd long forgotten about it because we're focused on our conversation. All because some foreign entity of which we were ignorant entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, we became fearful and accusatory of one another. So the lesson taught is ignorance breeds fear. Those things we don't understand make us afraid. If that fear is not addressed and relieved, that fear in turn will escalate into hatred because we hate the things that frighten us. If that hatred is present and not addressed and relieved, that in turn will escalate into anger, which turns into destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? At the end of the day, they may have been harmless and we were simply ignorant. Can you imagine me getting shot or my secretary getting shot
Mm-hmm.
because an ice cube melted.
I know.
Me jumping across the table and knocking the daylights out of some bodyguard and some grand dragon because an ice cube melted. No, it's crazy, but it happens.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, this is not just with adults. This is also with children. Oftentimes I speak to school kids, middle school and otherwise, okay? Colleges, yeah, of course, colleges, but a lot of times middle schools. And when I'm talking to young people, I might be standing in the front of the classroom and there'll be, 6 or 7 rows of desks and kids sitting there. And I'm talking to them, just like you and I are talking right now, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'll say, hey, there's a snake under your chair. And I'll point to somebody in the front row and point down under their chair and say, there's a snake there, right? Everybody in the front row and all the way back to the last row scream and throw their legs up in the air. I'm pointing to one chair and people in the back are throwing their legs up in the air, all right? And they're screaming. And so then they realize there's no snake there. And they're, and so I say to them, why are you all screaming and going crazy? And then the responses I get are, I hate snakes. I'm afraid of snakes. Well, I'm afraid of snakes. There's your fear. I hate snakes. There's your hatred. And then I say to them, well, why do you hate snakes? Why are you afraid of snakes? Well, because they're slimy. They're poisonous. Well, now there's your ignorance. If you've ever touched a snake, which I'm sure you have, it's not slimy, it's
smooth.
dry.
It's very smooth.
Exactly. And not all snakes are poisonous. So there's the ignorance. Ignorance leads to fear. Fear leads to hatred. So then I ask them, okay, well, obviously there's no snake under your chair, but let's just say there really was a snake under your chair and I was being for real. What would you want me to do about it? You know what they say? Kill it. There's your destruction. So that goes from childhood to adulthood. Ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, here's the problem, what I have found, and I'll tell you the solution. That's the problem. But a bigger problem is we have been addressing this the wrong way. We're starting at the top with the destruction and trying to trickle down. That kind of cure works in corporations, in companies, in departments. You start at the top because everything trickles down to the people, to the subordinates down below. So like, if you have a police department and the cops on the street are acting stupid, you got to talk to the top and get people at the top. If it's loose at the top, it's going to be loose at the bottom. If they're tight at the top, it's going to trickle down and the cops on the beat are going to be tight. Okay. That works that way. But when you're dealing with something like this, top down doesn't work. You got to do bottom up. I say, forget about the destruction. What's destroyed is not coming back. All right. Forget about the next level down, the hatred. Forget about it. All right. It's a symptom. It's a byproduct, just like the destruction. The next level down, the fear. Forget about it. Another symptom. Go to the root cause. The root cause, the nucleus of all this that caused all those symptoms is the ignorance. If you can cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get angry about and destroy. The good thing is there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure. That is where we need to focus our efforts, our energy, our money, and our time on curing that ignorance. And we can do it. But we spend too much time trying to cure some symptom. It's like if you got cancer in your bone, you can't put a Band-Aid on the surface. You got to hit that chemo and radiation down to the bone, And racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, these things are cancers, man. They're not, the typical bellyache, just take an aspirin or you scrape yourself because you're playing baseball and you skin your knee and put a Band-Aid on it. No, you got to go down to the nucleus.
Well, I mean, that's what you've been doing. So, I mean, just to kind of tie it all up. I mean, what ended up happening with the interview, and then how did this kind of set
Okay.
you on towards talking with so many other folks?
Well, I began talking to Mr. Kelly, then I began traveling around the country, interviewing different leaders and members, things like that. Some people would talk to me, some people would not talk to me, some people wanted to fight me, and there would be some physical confrontation and things like that. But with Mr. Kelly, he went on, okay, I began inviting him down to my house. And he would sit right over there on the couch with his Nighthawk. Nighthawk would get bored, pull out his gun, and twirl it on his finger while Mr. Kelly and I talked across my little coffee table here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting over here in the other chair. And this went on for a couple of years. I'm sitting right now at my dining room table. Sometimes we even sit here and have lunch or have dinner. The Klan leader and me.
And you just talk about stuff in life.
Stuff in life. We'd even talk about James Bond because he liked James Bond movies.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, how'd you like, that movie? What'd you think of Pierce Brosnan? What'd you think of, Roger Moore, Sean Connery, or whatever, things not even, related to the Klan, just human things. Okay. Yeah. And so we're socializing. Mm-hmm. So he's beginning to see me as a human being. I already saw him as a human being with some bad ideas. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm providing him an opportunity to see me as a human being. All right. And so that's, we share mozzarella sticks out of the same basket, the same salt and pepper shaker. He'd never done that before. Mm. You and I have done it millions of times with millions of different people. Mm-hmm. Okay. But he's never gone out and socialized with somebody outside of his race. Okay. Mm. Now, when he works his day job, there are different people there on the job. He has to work there because he needs the money to pay his mortgage or pay his bills. But at 5 o'clock, when he gets off work, does he go to happy hour with some black guy or some Jewish guy or some Muslim guy? No, he only goes with his own kind. Mm-hmm. But when he's being paid to work a job, he has to do what he has to do to make his money. Okay. Just like, there are racist cops out there, but sometimes they have to work with black cops, but that doesn't mean they stop being racist. Okay. So, they don't associate with those black cops once they're off the beat. Okay. So same thing. So anyway, he was coming down here for 2 years. After the first year, he began coming by himself. He trusted me that much. No Nighthawk. Wow. All right. But in those 2 years, he never invited me to his house. Anytime I would go up there to his area to have to run an errand or whatever, drop off a music contract or something, I'd call him and say, "Hey man, what are you doing?" If he said nothing, I'd say, "Well, come, run this errand with me." He'd always want to meet me somewhere, like the park and ride, and then he'd park his car, get in my car, we'd ride around and do my errand, stop and get lunch, whatever. Well, after 2 years, he was elevated from Grand Dragon state leader to Imperial Wizard, national leader. Wow. All right. And then he began inviting me to his house. And I would go to his house. I would see his Klan den where he'd have his meetings. He'd let me take pictures, take some notes from my book. He began inviting me to some Klan rallies. I'd go to these Klan rallies, watch them light up this cross and all kinds of stuff. And, take some more pictures. And then, over time, he began seeing things differently. He began seeing things differently. And eventually he left the Ku Klux Klan. Wow. He renounced it and left it. And today I own his robe and hood. Wow. And today I own many robes and hoods and Nazi flags, swastikas, all kinds of, crazy stuff, which I'm going to put in a museum. But that's the problem. I saw it happen time and time again. And I realized, I've stumbled onto something and I need to keep doing this. And one of the things that I realized, Xavier, is this. I always knew this, but I never put it into application. I never set out to convert anybody. It was not my mission to convert these people. It was just my mission to find out why. Why do you hate me when you don't even know me? All you see is my skin color, and you make these assertions about me. You don't even know me. I just want to understand why. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong, quit this stuff, give me your robe and hood. That was not my mission, okay? Because when you were a kid, when I was a kid, we all heard the saying, a tiger does not change his stripes, a leopard does not change his spots, right? So why would I think that a Klansman would change his Robin Hood? That's who he is. But I was wrong. Because, yes, a leopard does not change its spots. And a tiger does not change its stripes. Why? Because they were born with those stripes and spots. A Klansman or Klanswoman is not born with that Robin Hood. That is a learned behavior. And what can be learned can also be unlearned. And if it's learned over time, it has to be unlearned over time. If it's learned overnight, then maybe it can be unlearned overnight, okay? So when it began happening time and time again, I realized I stumbled onto something. And what I stumbled onto was this. It was in my approach in conversing with these people. Several things. One, your credibility is your most valuable asset, all right? You only have one opportunity to make a good first impression on somebody. You know, if you're lucky, you may have a second or third opportunity to see that person, but you only have one opportunity to make a good first impression. And most people will judge you by their first impression of you. So I want to see this person, this white supremacist, this neo-Nazi, this KKK person. I want to see them more than just that one time. I want to see them again and again. Well, if I'm not credible, they're not going to want to see me again. All right. So even if they don't like me and I'm credible, there's a better chance that they will see me again. Because while, you know, also what I've learned is this, while you are actively learning about somebody else, at the same time, you are passively teaching them about yourself. Because they are assessing you every second. You know, you don't realize it, but you know, they're watching your body language, they're fact checking you in their head, all kinds of stuff. So if they catch you in a lie, that shoots your credibility right out the window, because they already don't like you, right? And they're trying to find more reasons not to like you. You slip up one time, you're done, all right? So you only have one chance to make a good first impression. Now, I don't believe in kissing anybody's rear end, but I believe in being transparent.
Sure.
So, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. And I tell them this, you know, I say, listen, if there's something that I know to be factual, I will tell them, listen, I know this for a fact, and I want you to fact check me. If I'm going to express an opinion or I don't know, I'm going to say, you know, this is my opinion. This is how I feel. This is what I think. I may be right, I may be wrong, but this is my opinion. Because I don't want to give anybody my opinion and call it a fact, and then they find out that I'm wrong. Again, that would shoot me down, all right? So it's like, you know, if you go out on a date for the first time and you don't impress that girl, and you try to ask her out again next week, she's gonna blow you off, right? She come up with some kind of excuse, nah, you know, I'm tied up or whatever, or no, I don't think we're compatible. Okay, but if you do impress her the first time, yeah, you can take her out again next week. It's the same thing with these people. So even if the guy doesn't like me, but I'm credible, and I say, hey, listen, I really appreciate, you know, you spending the time with me. You've given me a lot to think about. Let me process a little bit. Is it okay if we get together maybe in 2 weeks? I might have some follow-up questions. Yeah, okay. You know, that's what I want. And that's how I do it. Okay, now, as I said, one's perception is one's reality. All right. Whatever they perceive becomes their reality, whether it's real or not. It's real to them.
Right.
So don't attack their reality, even though you know it's a ridiculous thought that they have about, you know, Jewish people having horns or Black people having tails or, you know, whatever the thing is. Don't attack their reality, because if you do, you're going to get resistance, pushback. Because they only know what they know. All right. If you want them to change their reality, you can't change it. What you can do is you can offer them a better perception, or perceptions, plural. If they resonate with your perception, then they will change their own reality, because one's perception becomes one's reality. So an example that I will give you is this. Let's say you have a young 7 or 8 year old brother. And he goes to a magic show with his buddies. And he comes home and tells you, Xavier, You're not going to believe this. This magician on stage, he asked for a female volunteer, and 50 girls raised their hand, and he picked out one and brought her up on stage. And then he had her climb into this long box and stick her feet out the hole at that end and put her head out the hole at this end. And then he closed the box and he took a chainsaw and cut the box in half, right down the middle of the box. And then he told that lady to wiggle her feet, and she wiggled her feet. And you're like, nah, it didn't really happen like that. Yes, it did. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. You weren't even there. I saw it. Mm-hmm. You are attacking his reality by telling him he's wrong. Mm-hmm. He knows what he saw. That's what he perceived. His perception was that man cut that woman in half, and that is his reality. Right. And you cannot attack that man's reality. Mm-hmm. All right? So to even make it more real to you, he tells you, well, after she wiggled her feet, he took the half of the box with the feet and moved it over here to stage right, and the half of the box with the head and moved it over there to stage left. And then he walked over there and he talked to the lady's head, and the lady's head talked back to him. And then he brought the two halves of the box back together. He opened the lid and he did some incantation, and the lady climbed out full form, no blood, back together. He cut her in half. He put her back together. And you're like, well, no, it's an illusion. No, it's not an illusion. I saw it. You're pissing this guy off, mm-hmm. because you are attacking his reality. You will get nowhere. Mm. All right. So it's not real. You're old enough to know that. Whether you know how the trick works or not, the man did not cut that woman in half. All right. So you say to him, look, I hear what you're saying, but do you think that maybe, just maybe, perhaps it's possible that when you said he asked for a female volunteer, you said 50 women raised their hand and he picked out one out of the audience. You think maybe it's possible that perhaps she works for him? He planted her in the audience. She knows the trick. She travels all over the country with him to every show and sits in the same seat in the audience. He just picks her up. And so when she comes up there on stage and he puts her in the box, there's already a pair of mannequin legs laying in the box, on the floor of the box, that are wearing the same stockings and same shoes that she has on. She picks them up and sticks them out the hole, and then she brings her own legs up under her chest. So her whole body is on that half of the box. So he tells her to wiggle her feet. She just shakes those legs, those dummy legs, right? Mm-hmm. Then he cuts the box in half, and when he separates them, the dummy legs are over there. Now, he can't have you looking at those dummy legs because they're not going to move anymore. So he has to draw your attention away from those legs. So he walks over there to where the head is, and he talks to the head. Her whole body's over there. So that way you're not paying attention to those dummy legs. And then he brings the two boxes back together. She pulls the legs out of the thing, and then he does his incantation. He opens the box, and out she climbs. And then your brother says, that's probably the only way that would work. You've offered him a better perception that he has resonated with, and therefore he changes his own reality. So, there are so many different media outlets that, you see my name, it says, Black musician converts X number of KKK people. No, I didn't convert anybody. Yeah. I have been the impetus for over 200 to convert themselves. I didn't even convert one, but I offer better perceptions. And when they resonate with it, they change their own mind. And that's how that is effective.
I have to say, I mean, I could absolutely listen to you tell all of these stories for hours. I mean, you're very captivating. And I have to say, you are probably the most courageous person I've ever personally met. I mean, just hearing your story is, I probably would not have done that. I don't know many people that would do that. So it's a very courageous thing. And I think the biggest, I will certainly think about this conversation for many, many days and weeks afterwards. But it's one of those things where at the end of the day, we have our humanity And that's what connects us, right? We have many differences, but we have many similarities. And if each individual is a little bit curious, a little bold, a little courageous to talk to someone that maybe looks different or thinks different or speaks different, or, you'll find differences, but you will also find many human similarities. And you just did it at the very extreme end. And so there's a lot of big credit to you for doing that. I obviously want to be respectful of your time, Daryl.
No problem. Let me add a couple more things, if I may.
Please.
For me, truly, I did not consider it. I mean, I understand where you get the courageousness part, but for me, I really didn't consider it that as much as I considered it curiosity. Curiosity, because I was always learning about different cultures, different beliefs from my global travels. And so I was curious about this culture and belief. And as I said, perhaps had I grown up here in my own country, would I be doing this today? Maybe not. Maybe I'd be staying as far away from those people as I could. Right. I would have had a different experience, right?
Sure.
So for me, it wasn't really, courage as much as it was curiosity. It's like, that's why you put those childproof things in your plugs, your outlets on the wall. When you have little toddlers, they might go put their finger in there. Is it courageous for them to go put their finger in there? No, it's curiosity. It's that kind of thing. My naivete. I want to learn about it. So that's number one. But yes, a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. Nothing gets resolved without conversation. When two enemies are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. They may even get a little loud and disagree, but they're still talking.
Right.
It's when the conversation ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So you want to keep the conversation going. Like, somebody in the KKK or neo-Nazi movement or whatever, and we start this far apart. We're at opposite ends of the spectrum, right? If we talk for 5 minutes with your worst enemy, you will find something in common. And that gap begins to narrow. You talk for another 5 minutes, you'll find more, and the gap narrows more. When you get right here, you are in a relationship with your adversary. You may not be, best friends and hang out and stuff, but you're in a cordial relationship. You keep on talking, you find more, and the gap closes some more. Now you're friendly, you're in a friendship. And as you get here, the trivial things that you have in contrast, like skin color, or whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple, they began to matter less and less because you have so many other things in common. What do you care if that person does not worship at the same institution that you do, or that person has a different skin color, or wears a bald head and you wear your hair down to your shoulders? What does it matter? That kind of thing, right? And that's where we need to get. And that is the result of conversation. Everybody has something in common. What I learned is this. I have been to 61 countries on 6 continents. I've performed in all 50 states. So I have been exposed to a multitude of cultures, skin colors, ethnicities, religions. All of that has helped shape who I've become. And I can tell you, Xavier, all this travel does not make me a better human being than somebody else. What it does is it gives me a better perspective on humanity than most people who've not been exposed to that. That's all. Okay. And what I've learned is this: no matter how far I go from my own country, the US, whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico or to the other side of the planet, everybody I meet, regardless of what differences we have, I always conclude we all are human beings. And I always conclude that all of us I've narrowed it down to these 5 core values that everybody on this planet wants. We all want to be loved. We all want to be respected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be treated fairly. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else would want for their family.
Mm-hmm.
If we can learn to apply those 5 core values or any of those values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or in a culture or a society in which we're unfamiliar, it doesn't have to be about race. It can be about anything, any topic. If we apply those 5 core values, I will guarantee the navigation will be much more smooth and much more positive. And that's what I've been doing, doing that kind of thing. Because, listen, how is it that we can build the technology in this country, to put a man on the moon? That's pretty phenomenal in itself. But we also built the technology to talk to that man on the moon who was walking around, Neil Armstrong, talking about one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. We were talking with him live all the way to the moon back in the 60s, right? Via satellite radio phone. We invented that technology. Everybody everybody I know has email or a cell phone. They type a few words, type a few numbers, hit send. They're talking to the state right next door. They're talking across the country. They're talking to Europe, China, Australia, Africa, wherever they want to talk. We invented that technology. How is it that we Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on the face of the earth, yet many of us have difficulty talking to the person who lives right next door because he or she is a different color, a different religion, a different persuasion? It seems to me that before we can call ourselves the greatest, our ideology needs to catch up to our technology, and then we can truly brag. We are living in the 21st century. We're living in space age times. Why are we still thinking with Stone Age minds?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 110% with everything you said. I mean, I fully agree with you. It is, I think, for each person's individual psychology, a type of reckoning or a type of honesty they have to have with themselves of why am I so afraid, or why do I not want to do this, or why is this seemingly difficult? And I think when people try and they have a little curiosity, then they're able to say, oh, okay, there's a few things. And I think sometimes people don't want to get rid of their ideas or get rid of their beliefs because it makes them feel safe or secure or feel good. And when they do that, then that's where it's like, oh, I have to now, this doesn't fit the way it was, and I have to kind of adjust my beliefs, and that can be really hard for people.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. But then it becomes a struggle for them. It becomes a dilemma because they're constantly fighting with themselves.
Yes.
It's like a cognitive dissonance going on with them, right? And what's very troublesome is this. We've seen in the last 4 or 5 years here with the last election and stuff, and the previous one, that families and best friends have become divided. People don't want to go to their family's house for Thanksgiving dinner because my sister voted for so-and-so and I voted for so-and-so. We can't talk, so I'm not going to have dinner with my family. Or my best friend, I had to unfriend them because they voted for this person, or whatever. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yes, it is.
Okay? Yes, people are welcome to vote for whoever they want to vote for. Some choices are better than others. Some choices are worse than others, okay? But here's the thing. Whoever becomes president of the United States is only going to be there for a minimum of 4 years and a maximum of 8 years. How long have you been with your family? Decades. Are you going to throw away decades over somebody for 4 years or 8 years? Are you crazy? Apply those values. Don't try to change their reality because they voted for this guy and you think this person is horrible, and you tell them, no, you need to, not vote for him, not support him or whatever. He's terrible and blah, blah, blah. He does this, he does that, regardless of who it is. Don't change their reality. Give them a better perception.
That's right. Yeah, I fully agree. People are it's very easy to be negative and cynical, and sometimes I can be that way as well. But I think it's much better to try and say, well, do people have another option? Do they have another alternative? Do they have another perspective? If you're not giving that to people, or if you're not showing them, hey, have you considered this or looked at this? Then yeah, it's very easy to beat up people or beat up ideas. That's, and maybe there's a place to critique ideas, but not where you're not engaging with people anymore, right? People should always be, I think, a little bit more important than ideas.
Absolutely.
And I think that gets lost on so many people, and it's almost too easy to take the out, and that's again, we need more folks like yourself to do the hard work.
Well, sometimes people say to me, well, Daryl, man, you're down there on the front lines. I can't do that, man. Either they're afraid, or they're afraid they'll get angry and punch somebody out, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Look, I understand that. Okay, you don't have to be on the front line.
Right.
You can be on the back line. You can be on the sideline. You can be online, but be doing something, because we need a 360: back line, sideline, online, front line. All right. For example, you can probably tell me the name of your favorite movie, and you told me it won 8 Oscars. You can probably tell me who starred in it. All right, the people who starred in it are on the front line, and they did a good job acting, and you love the movie, and you love the way they acted and whatever else. But can you tell me who the screenwriter was? Can you tell me the name of the guy behind the camera filming them? Can you tell me the name of the stuntman who doubled for them when a fight broke out or whatever in the movie? You tell me the name of the person who set up the stage? No. But those are people who are on the sideline, the back line, behind the camera, and of course the actors on the front line. All right. All of them put together is what made that movie get those 8 Oscars. Okay. So that's what I tell people. You don't have to be on, you're concerned about this. You don't have to be on the front line. All right, let somebody who's comfortable be there. You can be on the back line or the sideline, or do something online to support, these endeavors. That's what it takes. Teamwork.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. Well, Daryl, where can people find you? Where can they find your work? Where can they find you in all the right places?
They can find me on Twitter and Instagram. Both are at Real Daryl Davis, and DarylDavis.com. That's DARYL, only one R. DarylDavis.com. LinkedIn. And I'd love to hear from people, and I really appreciate you're taking the time to interview me. Also, check me out at FAIR, FAIR. Which stands for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. It's a fantastic foundation that's only just over a year old, and it's doing some phenomenal work. I get a lot of requests to support this and support that, and and I have to be very careful what I support. But FAIR is one of the ones that I am in 100% supportive of. Another platform is called Minds, MINDS, Minds.com. Check me out there. It's a platform for free speech. We're against deplatforming people and flattening them and giving them the opportunity to express their ideas and their beliefs, whether we agree with them or not. As long as they're not advocating killing somebody or injuring somebody. Sure. Whatever beliefs they have, come to Minds. Let's talk about it. Because the way you combat bad ideas is with more good ideas. Yeah, no, I agree. Daryl, I can't say enough thanks for coming and talking to me. It was such a really, really incredible conversation, and one I absolutely value. So I can't say enough thanks. My pleasure.